Hey everyone, quick question before we start. Would you ever walk alone through a dark forest at midnight? Let me know in the comments. And if you love scary stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's begin. I'm honestly not exactly sure where to begin. It's something I've kept quiet about for more than half a decade, both because of a promise my friends and I made that night and honestly, because it was the only way to keep some semblance of sanity since then. I find myself waking up almost every night, drenched in sweat, my heart racing from nightmares. For years, I tried telling myself it was just a bad dream, nothing more. And for the most part, that seemed to work. Until a week ago, when I saw something that shattered that illusion into a million pieces. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start at the beginning. You see, I live in a mid-sized coastal town in Maine, near Portland. A town that's been around since at least the mid-19th century. A place steeped in stories of supernatural events. Reports of strange occurrences have circulated for over half a century. Ghostly voices echoing from the once busy shipyards by the harbor. Sounds of old movies flickering in a vintage Art Deco theater in town after closing hours. One of the last remaining in the nation. Right up to eerie music and laughter, drifting from the old hotel ballroom now turned into apartments. One of the most notable of these places, so significant that it once stood at the heart of our annual Halloween ghost tours, was the old hospital. Built in the mid-1920s, it served as our town's sole hospital until the early 1970s, when a modern facility was built and the old one closed. For a brief time in the 1980s and early 1990s, it housed a community college, but that too eventually left, leaving the building silent and abandoned once more. The official reason was that the structure didn't meet modern building codes, and the costs to modernize it were too high. But, as in every town, rumors spread about the real reason no one wanted to stay there any longer. In hushed tones, the older residents spoke of dark and terrifying things that happened within its walls. Stories of unethical experiments on patients and volunteers from the local county hospital, of doctors dabbling in the occult and holding secret rituals in the basement after hours, and of equally horrible things that one preferred not to speak of out loud. For my group of friends, all of whom were extremely interested in the supernatural and urban legends, the story of the hospital was the most exciting thing about our town. Every year, since we were 6 or 7, we'd go on the annual Halloween ghost walk, and each time the guide stopped us in front of the red-brown building, we'd all jump up, craning our necks to peer into the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of a ghost staring back at us. But nothing ever happened. And as the new millennium turned into the 2000s and 10s, our enthusiasm seemed to wane slightly. We were all caught up in our own lives, and soon our yearly tradition was forgotten. Until a cold, rainy day in early 2018. I had just woken up, off work for the day, when my phone rang on the nightstand. I reached over, picked it up, and was surprised to see Thomas's name on the display. I answered quickly. "Hello?" A moment later, Thomas's deep, booming voice came through the phone. "Hey Michael, how's it going?" I hadn't heard from my friend in nearly 3 years, not since he went off to college in Boston. I chuckled softly. "Man, it's been ages since I've heard from you. I'm good. How are you? How's college treating you?" I sank into my worn leather chair as he responded. "College is going great, thanks for asking." His tone turned teasing. "I heard you're turning 28 this summer, right?" I groaned. "Man, remind me again. I want to pretend 30 is still ages away." He laughed again. "Hey, how do you think I feel now that I'm 35? "My bad, man." I laughed back and looked out the window. The early morning fog hung over the harbor. "So, are you back in town or something?" I asked. I heard him shuffle on the other end. Yeah, actually I am for about a week. That's why I called. Are you free right now? I glanced at the clock. The digital numbers showed it was just past 10:30 a.m. No, not at all. I've got the day off, and I'm meeting up with Anna for dinner tonight. A soft sound of amusement came through Thomas's end. Damn, right. Today's your 5-year anniversary. Congrats. I thanked him, and then he continued. Look, I just called the others a few minutes ago. We're meeting at the coffee shop in the mall near Safeway. Come join us. I've got something planned from our old days now that we're all back in town. I couldn't help but grin. With Thomas, I knew it was going to be interesting, to say the least. All right, give me half an hour to get dressed and head over. About half an hour later, I pulled into the parking lot of the local mall. I spotted Thomas's black BMW X3 parked nearby and headed into the coffee shop. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes filled the air. Many patrons were still there, enjoying a leisurely breakfast. Turning right, I spotted a hand waving from the second floor of the bank across the street. Over here, Michael. Waving at Francis, the shop owner who greeted us with a warm smile, I crossed the tiled floor and sat down on an empty red vinyl booth. Looking up, 3 smiling faces greeted me. Hey, Michael, long time no see, brother, shouted Luke, extending his hand for a fist bump. Anna waved from the other side, her chestnut curls bouncing lightly on her shoulders. A big hand landed on my shoulder, and I turned to see Thomas's huge grin looking down at me. Hey man, he simply said. We exchanged hearty greetings, ordered grilled cheese sandwiches and coffee, and dove into reminiscing about the old days, laughing and sharing what had happened since we last met. I was the only one who had stayed in town, working a steady job at the local fish processing plant by the waterfront, and occasionally on one of the fishing boats in the summer. Thomas had gone off to college in Boston, Luke moved to New York for an important job, and Anna relocated to San Francisco to work as a photographer, chasing her passion. When our food arrived, I suddenly realized just how much I had missed our circle of friends, how much I missed hanging out with them. I had a small group of other locals I was friends with, and of course, Lena. But the dynamic the 4 of us shared was something no one else could replicate. Okay, you're probably wondering why I got us together, right? Thomas asked between bites. Of course, Luke replied with a playful grin. I thought you just got us together to sit around and bore us. Thomas laughed and flashed a mischievous grin. Smart Alec. No, I pulled us together because I saw something yesterday. He pulled out an issue of the local paper, the Portland Gazette, and laid it on the table. I craned my neck to read the headline. Old Port Haven Hospital to be demolished in coming weeks. Man, crap, Luke said, scanning the article, then looked up. Anna leaned in so she could read it herself. So they're finally going to tear it down? She asked. Thomas shrugged. Seems so. They'll probably turn the area into a parking lot or something, according to the article. I leaned back in my seat, feeling a small wave of sadness wash over me, and managed to say the only thing that came to mind. That sucks. It didn't just feel like a piece of the town's history, no matter how dark, that was being destroyed, but also a beloved piece of our own personal history. The tours of the hospital had been such a staple of our childhood that it felt almost like we were finally letting go of a childhood security blanket, as strange as that might sound. Thomas nodded. It really sucks, but it says here that demolition won't start until early to mid-April. That means it'll still be standing for a few more weeks. I sat up straighter and heard a mischievous lilt in Thomas's voice. Oh boy, he had something planned. The other 2 seemed to notice it too. What are you thinking? Luke asked, leaning in. Thomas lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I don't think we ever got the chance to see inside the building. So why don't we sneak in this weekend and check it out? Let's make an adventure out of it. All at once, everyone sat up straighter, staring at him. You serious? Anna whispered. As serious as a heart attack, he declared. I had to laugh softly. Man, you're as crazy as ever. He flashed his signature grin at me. Don't you know? What about the cops? Luke asked. You know the city has been cracking down on trespassers. They'll probably be on high alert until the building's torn down. Thomas grinned wider. I know for a fact they'll be somewhere else this weekend since Easter is Sunday. We have about a 2-hour window on Saturday night where we can sneak in, check it out, and get out without being caught. He looked at us. So, what do you say? One last time, one last adventure in the hospital to mark the end of an era? For a second, there was silence. Then Luke laughed quietly. What the hell? Why not? I'm in. Thomas turned to Anna, who nodded with a small smile. I'm in too. It's the last chance we'll have to see the place anyway. I've always wanted to see the inside. I noticed they were all looking at me, waiting for my response. Michael? Thomas asked. For a split second, a part of me screamed that this was a bad idea, especially considering how the local cops might be, but then I shoved that thought aside. This could be one of the last memories we share before our lives truly part ways. I'd regret saying no, man. Sure, why not? I grinned. Yeah, I'm in. And just like that, the plan was set. Later that night, during my anniversary date with Lena at a cozy seaside diner, I pushed the plan out of my mind. I lost myself in her sparkling blue eyes and warm smile. Everything else faded away. But as I lay in bed afterward, listening to her gentle breathing beside me, I stared at the dark ceiling and wondered what I had gotten myself into. The rest of the week flew by, and before I knew it, Saturday arrived. In the afternoon, I made a detour to the local hardware store to pick up a few things I'd need for our adventure that night. Finally, as the last remnants of daylight vanished from the sky, I drove across town towards the meeting spot where the others were waiting. As I turned onto a quieter street near the hospital, the headlights of my BMW caught the faded, peeling red-brown paint of the old hospital and reflected off its boarded-up windows. I parked a few blocks away by the city park, stepped out of the car, grabbed my gear from the trunk, and walked back toward our meeting point. Streetlights still flickered in the neighborhood houses, and I silently prayed no one would see us from their windows. The cool spring air whipped against my face as I crossed the street until I was literally in the shadow of the 4-story building. I paused and looked up, appreciating for the first time the sheer size of the structure. It towered high and wide before me, almost imposing in the gathering darkness. It looked like a sleeping beast at dusk, one that could wake at any moment. I shook my head slightly. Where on earth did that thought come from? The wind whipped at my back and a slight shiver ran up my spine, though I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the building. Right then, a hand landed on my shoulder. I nearly jumped a foot off the ground, catching my breath. I heard a quiet laugh behind me and turned to see Thomas grinning mischievously. "You jerk," I hissed, though I couldn't suppress a soft laugh of relief. "What, did I scare you?" he teased, nudging my shoulder, then pointing to the back of the building. "Come on, the others are waiting over there." He noticed my backpack and raised an eyebrow. "What have you got in there?" I unzipped it and showed him. A pair of gloves, so I don't cut myself on glass or metal, a flashlight so we can see where we're going, and I pulled out a video camera. This, to document everything. He let out a low whistle. "And that's why we always count on you, man. You're always prepared." With that, he guided me to the back of the hospital. Luke and Anna were already near a rear window. I noticed with a hint of disapproval that someone, probably Thomas or Luke, had smashed the glass. "So, who goes in first?" Thomas whispered, looking around. "I think I'll do it," Luke whispered after a moment. He swept the remaining glass shards aside, hoisted himself up, and climbed over the windowsill until he vanished inside. A moment later, his head appeared. "All clear, come on," he said with a huge grin. Thomas helped Anna up, then climbed in himself. For a few moments, I was left alone outside, quickly surveying my surroundings. The woods behind the hospital blended into darkness, and I noticed for the first time that no animal sounds were heard. No rustling of deer through the pines, no hoot of an owl, nothing. The realization sent another shiver down my spine, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. I snorted. "Come on, it's barely out of winter, Michael. Most critters aren't even out yet. Stop spooking yourself," I muttered. With that, I grabbed the windowsill, hoisted myself up, and slipped inside. The first thing I noticed upon standing was how musty it was. The air was thick, heavy with dust, and who knows what else. I hoped I wasn't inhaling too much mold or asbestos. I didn't bring a mask. I reached into my backpack, pulled out the gloves first, then the flashlight. Flicking it on, I shaded the beam slightly with my free hand and shone it around. The room we entered was large and, as I suspected, empty. The same red-brown hue that adorned the outside of the building decorated the walls here, though the floor seemed tiled. I could only guess what its purpose had been in the hospital's heyday, long before I was born. It could have been an administrative office or a patient room. I'll never know. At that moment, I realized I was alone in the room. What the... I hadn't heard the others enter. I'd been too distracted by my surroundings. Guys?" I called softly. Silence greeted me for a few moments, then footsteps came from the doorway. The steps approached, and for a brief moment I felt another shiver run down my spine. A dark figure appeared in the doorway, and I almost hesitated to switch on the light, afraid of what, or who, I might see. But then I shook off the fear and lifted my hand away from the light. Thomas looked at me, an even wider grin spreading across his face than usual. He motioned for me to follow him. "Come on," he whispered. "This place is nuts." I hurried after him, stepping out of the room into a long corridor that stretched away and disappeared into darkness. The others waited ahead, and we all began grinning like teenagers sneaking into a R-rated horror movie screening. The thrill of being somewhere we weren't supposed to be made us feel young and alive again. "So, where do we start?" Anna asked. "There are 4 floors to explore, plus the basement, and we've got little time to do it all." Thomas rubbed his stubble thoughtfully. "I think we start here and then work our way up. We'll save the basement for last." We all nodded. I handed the video camera to Anna. "You're the best at filming us," I said, "so keep recording." For the next 35 to 40 minutes, we slowly moved from room to room and floor to floor. The others had flashlights too, and with each room we shined our lights into, we were either greeted by emptiness or, occasionally, a few old desks and chairs, remnants from when it served as a community college. Despite the mild disappointment of empty rooms, we eagerly continued exploring every space, speculating on what they might have been in the old days. "That could have been the maternity ward," Anna whispered as we reached the 3rd floor, angling the camera into a particularly large row of rooms. "This might be where my mom and grandma were born." Her excitement fueled us all, and we pressed on until we finally reached the top floor. This floor seemed to have only a few remaining walls, and we walked from one end to the other without much hindrance. When we reached the far end, Luke noticed something and shone his light into a corner. "Hey, check out this graffiti," he said. We crowded around him and directed our lights at the dark red letters sprayed on the wall. "Caution, Dr. Craddock." Luke let out a low laugh. "Holy crap, I nearly forgot the legend of Dr. Craddock," he whispered almost to himself. But his words stirred a long-forgotten memory in my mind, a story our tour guide once told us in the early 2000s, and which was never repeated. According to him, Dr. Craddock was one of the leading surgeons at Port Haven Hospital from the late 30s to the mid-60s, a man gifted both in mind and hands. He was also, according to rumors, one of the most malevolent men ever. He allegedly led many, if not all, of the unethical experiments, even performing surgeries without anesthesia, along with other staff who worshipped the occult. The guide said Craddock feared one thing above all else: death. He used experiments and occult practices to try to find a way to live forever, to escape the clutches of the Grim Reaper. And to escape the fate that awaited him in hell, the guide concluded. But it didn't seem to work as the man died in the late 70s. My friends murmured quietly among themselves, recalling the story, but I stopped listening. As I pondered the tale, a strange feeling began to creep over me. One I hadn't felt during our entire journey through the hospital, that twisted my stomach into knots. It was the feeling of being watched, the kind that seems to burn a hole right through the back of your head. Moving away from the others, I turned back toward the far end of the building. With my flashlight held low, I couldn't see much in the darkness. But I saw something. Many windows weren't boarded up, especially on this floor, and the yellow glow of streetlights outside seeped in, casting long shadows and a weak view of the area. In the distant corner was a shadow, one darker than the rest. That alone drew my gaze and stole the breath from my lungs. It had the shape of a person standing just out of sight. The feeling of being stared at intensified, and I swear I saw the shadowy figure take a step toward us. I quickly swung my flashlight and aimed it directly at the figure. There was nothing there. It was almost as if the beam had swept it away. If it had ever been there at all. As I moved the flashlight around, I felt something graze the nape of my neck, forcing an involuntary gasp as a bolt of fear shot up my spine. I spun around quickly to look behind me. The beam caught my friends as they turned to look at me. Once again, there was nothing there. My breathing came in short, sharp gasps as I tried to calm myself. "Dude, what's wrong?" Luke asked. For a moment, I considered telling them what I'd seen. Then I shook my head. "Nothing, man," I said, hoping my voice sounded calmer than I felt. "Look, let's just finish up and get out of here, okay? I don't want to stay too long with God knows what in the air." I saw Luke and Thomas immediately accept my answer, but Anna lowered the camera and gave me a serious look. She knew something was off. She always did with me. I just shook my head at her, letting her know I didn't want to say anything. Thomas finally sighed. "Okay, then, let's quickly check the stairs down to the basement and get out." I took a deep breath I hadn't realized I was holding, then nodded. "Sounds like a plan to me," I said, stepping aside as our friend led the way back down the stairs. This time, I followed at the rear, occasionally glancing back and shining my flashlight around. The feeling of being watched hadn't left me as we made our way back. It seemed to follow us, always just out of sight around a corner or in a stairwell. I couldn't hear anything, but all my instincts told me to stay alert. I reached under my coat and gripped the handle of the hunting knife I'd tucked there, feeling a small measure of comfort. Finally, we stood before the door to the basement. A flight of steps, lined with a rusty handrail, descended into the depths. For a moment, I considered telling the others that we should just leave the basement, but no. Scared as I was, I tried to stay rational. "You're not being followed, man. You haven't seen anything. Don't ruin it for the others." Repeating these thoughts, I followed the others down the steps. The sound of water dripping from somewhere deeper echoed in the silence as we took the last step into the bowels of the building. Our lights swept around. We saw many rooms branching off in different directions. It was almost like a maze. As I raised my light, I saw a plaque on a concrete archway. "Surgical wing." "Oh, fantastic," Anna said sarcastically when she spotted it. "We've found the damn surgical wing in the basement." Thomas stared into the darkness for a moment before turning to us. "Okay, let's check this out quickly," he murmured. I noticed for the first time that he himself seemed tense. The excitement he'd shown up to now was nearly gone. Was he seeing something too? The thought swirled in my mind, but before I could voice it, he turned and led the way deeper into the basement. The sensation of ants and roaches crawling under my skin, slowly scuttling beneath me, compelled me to keep up with them. The corridor and room seemed endless, though they were all empty. The feeling of being watched and scrutinized refused to leave me, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, hating how my back faced the darkness. Eventually, I stopped. "Okay, that's enough now. Time to tell everyone it's time to leave," I thought. I opened my mouth. "Hey guys." They all paused and turned toward me, but before I could say anything else, all our flashlights went out. And I don't mean they died one after the other. They all went out at exactly the same moment. Something that should be nearly impossible. Everything was plunged into pitch-black darkness. The deepest darkness I'd ever experienced. "What the hell just happened?" I heard Luke shout from somewhere to my left. "I don't know. Where are you?" Anna said, her voice now edged with clear fear. As I heard them trying to locate each other, the feeling of something brushing the back of my neck returned. I felt my heart race and my breath catch in my throat. Then my heart nearly stopped when I heard it. A sound coming from directly behind me and to my right, almost too soft to hear, but not quite. It was a voice. A deep, rasping male voice, one I had never heard before, and it seemed to carry more malice and evil than I had ever expected from a human voice. "A decent subject," it whispered softly, "but not quite good enough." The brushing at the back of my neck receded, and I felt my breathing return, though in frantic gasps, almost as though I were beginning to hyperventilate. What the hell? I managed to exhale, spinning around and drawing the knife from its sheath. I swung it out into the darkness, slashing around, but felt nothing hit the blades. "Who's down here?" I finally demanded, raising my voice. Luke and Anna stopped calling out to each other as I spoke. "Michael, what are you talking about?" I heard Anna call, the fear in her voice almost as tangible as what I felt. Before I could answer, I suddenly heard her shriek. "Anna!" I cried, my voice echoing off the stone walls. I heard her begin to whimper and cry, but she didn't respond. A moment later, I also heard Luke gasp. No sooner had a breath passed than all our flashlights flickered back on. The beams returned, and I swung mine around, shining it in all directions. I saw nothing, no sign of anyone behind me. When I looked back, I saw Luke doing the same, as if he were searching for someone. But Anna, she had collapsed, leaning against the wall, dropping the video camera, covering her face with her hands, sobbing loudly. I ran to her, knelt beside her. "Anna, what happened?" I asked. But she just shook her head and continued sobbing. I looked up at Luke. "Man, what the hell just happened?" I demanded, more forcefully than intended. For a moment, he didn't respond, then he turned to me. His face drained of color, an expression of utter terror etched across it. He looked down at the floor and murmured softly. I straightened up slightly, placing a hand on Anna's shoulder. "What?" "Not good enough," he whispered. Then he looked at me again. That's what the voice said to me. "Not good enough," it told me. My throat tightened at his words, my breath catching again. He'd heard the voice. Anna stopped crying, and when I looked down at her, I saw she was staring at Luke with an even more terrified expression than his. She said nothing, but she didn't need to. All three of us had heard the ghostly voice tell us we weren't good enough. Good enough for what? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice out. "Okay, we've had our fun. It's time to go, now." They both nodded, and I reached for Anna, helping her to her feet. She looked me in the eyes and finally whispered, "We have to get out of here immediately." I nodded. Agreed. I turned around. "Come on, Thomas, time to go." I called loudly, but Thomas was gone. The area where he'd been standing just ahead of us further down the corridor was completely lifeless. "What the hell?" Luke murmured, turning around. "Where the hell?" I realized with growing dread that I hadn't heard a single word from our friend since the flashlights went out. Not a word, not a sound. "Thomas?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the silence, broken only by the distant drip of water. No answer. "Thomas, where are you?" Luke called out himself. Once again, all we heard was the echo of his voice bouncing deeper into the basement and back. Oh, damn. I swung my light around and finally looked down to where he'd been standing. Footprints led off into the darkness. Thomas's footprints. I recognized the worn tread of his hiking boots. Luke noticed them too, stepped forward, shining his light on the prints, then into the dark corridor beyond. He turned to me. "What do we do?" His voice trembled slightly. Anna grabbed my arm. "Michael, we can't leave him here," she whispered, desperation in her tone. For a moment, I considered scooping her up, pushing Luke to head for the exit, and calling the police from outside. That would mean big trouble for us, but at this point it might be the safer choice. But I knew Anna was right. If it had been any of us, or Luke who disappeared, our friend wouldn't leave until he found us, no matter how terrifying the situation got. "Anna's right. We need to find him, then get out immediately," I said. Luke looked petrified at the thought of going deeper into the basement, but he nodded. With Anna still clutching my arm in a desperate grip, I slowly led the way down the corridor, following Thomas's footprints. We stuck close together, shining our flashlights into every dark room and corner as we proceeded. The feeling of being watched was still there, but now it was so much worse. It felt like dozens of eyes were on us, all with the worst intentions. If not people, then something else entirely. Trying to steady my nerves, I continued on, pretending not to hear the sounds that resembled footsteps scraping on the floor behind us, or fingernails on concrete walls. Finally, we reached a larger door than the others. I aimed my flashlight at the arch above it and saw another plaque. Operating Room 1, General Surgery. For some reason, those words sent a new surge of fear through me. I didn't want to admit it, but I began to think of the building as a sleeping creature we'd accidentally awakened. Finding this room felt almost like venturing into the belly of the beast. I gulped, forced myself to exhale slowly, and shone my light into the room. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. I assumed this room, like the rest of the building, would be empty, but it wasn't. An old operating table, long covered in decades of rust, stood in the middle of the room. Overturned medical carts with surgical tools lay scattered around it. I spotted rusty scalpels and suturing kits on the floor, along with faded, decaying surgical masks. As I swept my light aside, I saw numerous medical cabinets lining the walls. The entire room, if possible, exuded the worst vibes of the whole building. I never thought an inanimate place like a room could feel evil, but now it certainly did. At that moment, I aimed my flashlight at the back wall. We all nearly gasped in unison. Thomas stood almost directly against the wall, his back to us. I couldn't see a flashlight in either of his hands, and he seemed to be pressing his head against the damp concrete. For a moment, I thought the room had fallen silent too. Then a noise reached my ears, a sound that almost made my heart stop again. It was a voice speaking quickly, deeply, and softly, but it was in a language I had never heard before, one I probably shouldn't have heard. It sounded almost demonic in tone and cadence. Another realization overwhelmed me, sending another jolt of fear through my body. It was Thomas's voice murmuring a language I damn well knew, a language he shouldn't know despite his intelligence. At that very moment, Luke raised his light and shone it on Thomas's back. Thomas," he whispered. Immediately, the murmuring stopped. Everything fell silent. All sounds in the basement ceased, even the dripping water. It was as if every noise had been sucked away, and my ears began ringing fiercely in the silence, a silence so sharp it felt wrong. That was a mistake. My mind raced. Calling Thomas was a mistake. Then Thomas moved. He took a single step away from the wall, straightened to his full height. Towering over 2 meters, he looked down at us. He slowly turned his head from side to side, his neck cracking with an almost sickening sound, moving his shoulders, as if trying to recall sensation or get used to it. And then he spoke. "Good evening," he simply said. My heart pounded at the sound of those 2 words. It was Thomas's voice, yes, but it was wrong. The way he spoke, his intonation and cadence were completely different from the Thomas I knew. It was as if someone else were using his voice to speak. Almost as if he could read my thoughts, he slowly turned to face us. And this time, my heart truly stopped. Thomas stared at us, a smile on his face that I'd never seen before. It wasn't his usual goofiness or cheer. It was a smile filled only with evil and dark delight. What made me cover my mouth wasn't the smile at all, but his eyes. His usual warm, hazel eyes were gone. In their place were bright green eyes that definitely weren't his. I looked down in horror and realized he was holding something, one of the rusty scalpels. "Oh shit," Anna whispered, drawing a deep, sadistic chuckle from him. Then he suddenly became a blur, rushing toward us. I moved as fast as I could, hoping he wouldn't see me as I tried to grab the door handle that had swung open. I moved almost as quickly as Thomas, grabbed the handle and yanked the door closed. Just in time. I felt the impact slam into the other side. Looking down, knowing the handle would soon be grabbed from the other side, I spotted a piece of rebar on the floor next to me. "Luke!" I shouted, feeling the door handle being seized and pulled. Luke saw what I saw, grabbed the heavy rebar, lifted it, and jammed it against the handle. The door shook violently, and behind the metal I heard laughter. Evil, insane laughter. I knew the rebar wouldn't hold the door for long. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Anna and hoisting her into my arms. Luke didn't need to be told twice. We ran. We sprinted through the labyrinth of dark corridors, desperately searching for stairs leading out. As we ran, I glimpsed things in doorways, shadowy figures staring at us. Some had dark, coal-black eyes. Others had glowing ember-like cores like visions of hell. Some reached out as if to grab us, but we kept sprinting. I saw increasingly horrifying sights I can't describe. Behind us, the crash of the operating room door shattering echoed. As desperation surged within me, we rounded a corner and spotted a concrete staircase, our salvation. We took it two at a time, racing back through the ground floor area toward our broken window exit. I threw Anna nearly out the window before I jumped after her, Luke close behind. We didn't look back, we simply ran down the street to my car. That night was 5 years ago now. The three of us piled into my BMW X3 and drove to the police station. Despite our horror, we still decided not to speak of what we'd seen. We knew we'd be labeled crazy, possibly even committed to a psychiatric hospital. Instead, we told the officers that our friend Thomas had mentioned breaking into the hospital that night and we were worried. We must have looked nuts, barging into the station. But they took our case seriously and sent a few officers out. They found nothing. No sign of Thomas. No trace of my dropped video camera. No evidence of anyone there. Even his car had vanished from where he'd parked it. We didn't know what to make of it. It was as if our friend had never been there. The police promised to keep an eye out for him. But a part of me knew they would never find Thomas. Or whoever or whatever he was now. Before parting ways that evening, the three of us made a vow. We wouldn't tell anyone a word of what we had seen that night. "Let the building die in a few weeks," Anna said, tears streaming down her face for our lost friend. We all agreed. We kept in touch over the next weeks, and a few weeks later, the three of us went to watch the hospital be demolished. Seeing the building reduced to rubble seemed to help the others, but for me, it left an empty feeling. I couldn't shake the thoughts whispered by my mind. They told me that all the horror stories we'd heard over the years about the place were real. Far too real. And we were almost the last ones left. After the demolition, I rarely saw Anna or Luke again. They left town as quickly as possible, and I haven't heard from them since. I won't pretend otherwise. They had their reasons. If it hadn't been for Lena and my family, I would have left town long ago too. I still have nightmares that, as I said at the beginning, wake me up drenched in sweat. Nightmares of those shadows, of my friend trying to kill us, of an eternal chase through that basement with evil laughter growing ever closer. And now I think maybe I should tell you why I'm sharing all this with you, why I'm breaking a promise I've kept for over half a decade after so long. Because last week I picked up a copy of the Gazette at the coffee shop. The front page reported new doctors and nurses joining the staff at our local hospital, something urgently needed after a pandemic-induced shortage. The front page featured photos of some of the newcomers, and I froze, nearly dropping my coffee mug when one face caught my eye. A face I hadn't seen in 5 years, smiling broadly, in a strangely familiar way, but not quite. A face staring right back with bright green eyes. I felt myself start to tremble violently as I read the caption under his photo. The hospital welcomes Dr. John Craddock as the new chief surgeon. I wake up groggily, my eyes barely open, only to realize I've been leaning against the window. As I lift my head, I notice a sweat stain my forehead left on the glass. I yawn and regret forgetting the pack of gum in the trunk. A few seconds pass before I fully register where I am. This long drive has completely worn me out. Inside the car were me, my mom, my dad, and my little sister, who had taken the seat right beside me. We were on our way to a secluded town in the Appalachian Mountains that my mom had heard about. Excitedly, she had convinced us to spend a weekend there. She loves all those spiritual, quirky things. Once a week, she forces us to do yoga. We've been to 3 silent retreats, where you stay quiet for an entire week. And once, we even had a seance. Yes, you read that right. My mom conducted a seance with me and my little sister Lily when she was just 7 years old. And since then, she's been traumatized by the experience, even talking about it. My dad, on the other hand, seems more normal. though he can be odd sometimes, but not as much as my mom. The city skyline I saw before drifting off had transformed into a natural landscape of green hills and dense pine forests as I woke up. The town, which I knew nothing about, was a 5-hour drive away. We were close, having left the interstate and taken a narrow country road leading deep into the Appalachians. The forest was dark and filled with towering trees. After 10 minutes, my dad suddenly said, "All right, looks like we're here." I looked up from my phone and saw that we had arrived at a large clearing, about 5 football fields wide, surrounded by trees in every direction. In the center stood a few small wooden houses next to some farm buildings. That had to be the town. "Man," I said, "what kind of place is this?" My mom turned to me with enthusiasm. "It looks picturesque, doesn't it?" "Where did you hear about this dump?" I asked skeptically. She laughed. "At one of my New Age gatherings, one of the girls mentioned this place. She heard people go here to cleanse their souls." I looked at her with a disgusted expression. I don't think my soul needs cleansing. I'm fine." "Yeah," Lily chimed in. "Why couldn't we stay at a hotel with a nice pool like everyone else?" "Oh, Lily, it's like a hotel, just a bit different." "Sure, if you call a rundown place that looks like a 19th century village a hotel," Lily said sarcastically, returning to her phone. As we approached the entrance of the town, we noticed there was no parking lot, and the road we had taken was blocked by a wooden gate. We pulled over to the side and parked on the grass. We got out of the car, stretched, and suddenly, my sister poked her head out of her phone and said, "Mom, there's no reception here." "Really?" I asked. "Oh dear, try to survive without your phones for once. We're in an authentic place. Right, Robert?" My mom turned to my dad. "Yes, of course," he replied sarcastically, adding, "It looks so authentic that there are no regular streets or parking lots. And where are all the other tourist cars?" I wondered the same. "Well, that means we don't have to deal with other annoying tourists, haha." My mom laughed. Sometimes she's so naive that I feel if she ever got stuck on a deserted island with dangerous animals and no food or water, she wouldn't suspect or fear it as long as it's authentic. We grabbed our luggage and approached the wooden gate blocking the road. "How can I help you?" We all turned around in surprise to see an elderly gray-haired man in white clothing standing behind the gate. My mom walked up to him with a smile. "Hello. We're the Johnsons. A friend recommended us to come here. We'd like to stay the weekend, please." "You don't have a reservation?" I whispered to her. "I couldn't find their number or website," she whispered back, still smiling at the old man. He stared at us, assessing me and my family with his eyes before saying, "I'm the leader of the town. What brings you here?" "We came here because we heard this place helps with cleansing and soul purification," my mom replied innocently. The old man looked at her. "Do you believe in our method?" "Oh, of course. We firmly believe in this method," my mom said without hesitation. "We?" Lily asked nervously. My dad nudged her and told her to be quiet. The old man studied my mom and after a few seconds of doubt said, "Well, if you believe in this method, certainly. Come in. We'd be happy to accommodate you as long as you believe." He took a step back, opened the wooden gate and let us inside. We walked for a few minutes through the outskirts of the town, traveling on a gravel road surrounded by old wooden houses on green meadows. Next to each house stood a few young women in white, chatting and giggling with each other. But as we passed by them, they immediately stopped laughing and looked at us with peaceful grins. It unnerved me a bit, though Lily didn't even notice. She was busy getting a signal on her phone. My dad walked beside me and my mom walked with the town leader. "Can you tell us a bit about this place?" she asked him kindly. "Well, as you probably already figured out, this town is a special place," the town leader said. "It's cut off from any urban infrastructure. There's no electricity, no running water, and no cell reception." "Yeah, we noticed that," Lily said with a certain attitude. "No electricity and power?" my dad asked, surprised. "No," the old man replied. "We pump water from the well, and electricity is replaced by lanterns we light at night. Every evening at 6 p.m. we have dinner in the town center on the lawn. Right after, everyone returns to their huts and stays there until sunrise. Maybe we should just order pizza instead," I chuckled. "There's no entrance for cars or people who aren't from the town," the old man responded. "Well, we're not from this town," I said. My mom signaled me to stop the picky questions. "Well," the town leader replied, pausing before turning to me, "you're here because you believe in our method." We continued walking through the town and eventually reached the center, where a small hill with a well at the top stood. Around the well were more young women in white, laughing and giggling together. It seemed they were having a really good time, given how cheerful they were. We kept walking, and after a few minutes, the old man stopped beside an old wooden hut. "This is your place. You have bedrooms, a bathroom, and a small kitchen with some basic ingredients. We'll meet again at 6 p.m. When do we have to pay you?" my dad asked. The town leader turned to him and replied, "Don't worry, we'll discuss the costs later." Then he quickly walked away. Thank you for everything," my mom called after him. We entered the hut, and my parents opened the luggage and bags, starting to unpack in their bedroom. Lily and I entered our shared room. The interior was wooden, with 2 beds, one on each side. In the middle stood a dresser with a vase holding a few yellow flowers. Above it was a window overlooking the town, and on the horizon, the well in the center of the town was visible. I wandered around the house when suddenly, "Do you mean this seriously? We don't even have a damn TV," I heard Lily say from the living room. In every room I entered, I saw the same vase with a few yellow flowers. Mom? What's up with these flowers?" I asked as I entered her room. My mom approached the vase, gently stroking one of the flowers. "If I'm not mistaken, Clay, this flower is called marigold." "Marigold?" I asked. "Yes, Clay. Marigold is the name of this flower. According to some Appalachian traditions, marigolds have the power to summon the spirits of the dead. In some regions, they're called death bells, bells of the dead." A strange feeling began to fill my body. "Why do they have them in every room of our hut?" I asked. "Oh, Clay, don't underestimate others' beliefs," she replied. "I'm not underestimating them, it's just knock, knock, knock." Before I could respond, 3 soft knocking sounds interrupted me at the front door. We all went to the living room where the door was. I saw 3 young women dressed in white, smiling and waiting outside our door. I opened the door, and they immediately turned their smiling faces toward me. "Yes? How can we help you? Hello, welcome. We hope you feel comfortable here. We've brought your attire that you need to wear during your stay." The woman in the middle handed me 2 white suits and 2 white dresses. "Thank you." My mom thanked them while I was frozen, staring at their eerie smiles. "Don't forget that dinner is served for all townsfolk at 6 o'clock. Don't miss it. It will be delicious," the woman on the left said. And then the 3 giggled softly. "We'll be there," my dad said with a polite smile. I closed the door as the 3 walked away calmly and suspiciously. By 5:30, we were all dressed in white. Lily was still trying to get used to her white dress. My dad actually felt comfortable in it instead of wearing a suit every day, and my mom was the happiest because it resembled the outfits she wore in her New Age workshops. We left the hut, The sun was already setting, and the sky was orange. We headed to the town center. As we got closer, we noticed the well in the center of town, surrounded by a circle of large tables and chairs. Everyone there was dressed in white, mostly women and a few men, all smiling and looking too happy in their white clothes. We approached them, and soon everyone was paying attention to us, smiling even more. I felt a bit confused and strange that everyone was looking at me. My mom awkwardly smiled back. We sat in a row before the long table encircling the well. Next to us, 3 people, a father, a mother, and their son, sat down. They seemed like fellow tourists. "Are you new here?" the father asked my mom. "Yes, we arrived today. Nice to meet you. We're the Johnsons. And you?" "We're the Mackenzie family. We arrived yesterday. Nice to see more tourists here," he replied. "How did you get here?" my dad asked. "We didn't see any other cars outside." The family father was surprised and said, "Really? Maybe you came through a different entrance or parked your car in a shady, cooler spot," he continued. "But the truth is we didn't see any vehicles when we arrived either." "Oh, so our 2 families are the only outsiders here?" my mom asked. "Well, there was also a lovely couple here yesterday, but for some reason I don't see them today. It's a shame because they missed the most delicious meals I've ever eaten." "Really?" I asked. "Yes," the father replied. "The food here is out of this world." But before he could finish his sentence, the strange ringing of a large bell interrupted our conversation. All the townsfolk sat down at the table. Opposite the well stood the town elder we had seen earlier. He stood in the middle, raising his hands to the sky. "Good evening. Tonight, as every night, we gather to enjoy the god's meal." "Oh no. I hope this isn't one of those strange religious ceremonies," I thought to myself. Our community has invested a lot in the blessed cleansing work to provide us with this food. I raised an eyebrow, wondering what could be so pure about slaughtering a chicken or a cow, but I was too hungry to consider my conscience. "I'd like to congratulate the Johnson family," the old man pointed at us, "who have come tonight with the will to participate in the soul purification efforts." Everyone clapped and cheered for us, smiling. Of course. "Then," he said, "enjoy your dinner." Several women in white came over and began serving us the dishes. The meal was a large piece of meat along with rice. Everyone started eating, and so did we. As soon as I took a bite, it tasted strange. A flavor I had never experienced before. But then my taste buds transmitted the divine taste of this piece of meat to my mind. Oh, it was so delicious. I had never tasted such tasty meat in my life. It was 1,000 times better than any meat I'd ever eaten before. Even the rice was excellent, but I was too full from the meat. Even Mom and Dad loved it, and even my picky sister, despite her food choosiness, showed signs of satisfaction. After dinner, we stood up and returned to the hut. We were full and content. On the way back, we said goodbye to the Mackenzie family, who were heading to their hut. "I think I'm going to survive this weekend," I told my mom. "That's great, Clay. Glad to hear." My sister Lily was less enthusiastic, but at least she wasn't complaining about the lack of internet reception here. It seemed the place had cleansed her restless soul. When we returned to the hut, it was already night. We lit a lantern outside the door and entered the hut. We locked the door and got ready to go to sleep. The parents went to their shared bed, and Lily and I went to our beds. I lay down and tried to fall asleep. I wondered, why is it forbidden to leave the huts at night? What could possibly happen in a sleeping town full of secluded hippies in white who smile every day and know how to prepare excellent food? But as my thoughts raced through my head, I eventually fell asleep. A few hours later, I woke up, probably because I wasn't as tired from the drive here. It was still night. The wall clock showed 2 a.m. I went to the bathroom in our hut. When I returned to the room, I looked out the window. All the huts were dark and silent, but suddenly I heard a rather faint voice. I opened the window to hear better and realized the sound was coming from the center of the town, specifically the well. It sounded like people, really loud people. I had to check what it was. Lily was sleeping soundly in the bed beside me, and our parents were dreaming in their room. I went to the window and quietly slipped outside. I walked silently over the grass toward the well. The closer I got, the louder the sound became. When I reached the center of the town, I noticed that all the tables had disappeared, and the sound was coming from the well. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself. "What's happening at the well?" I approached quietly and then realized it. The voices coming from the well were screams, people screaming. I was shocked. I reached the edge of the well and peered inside. It was all dark. There was no water there. This well didn't seem to lead to a water channel. Why would the old man lie to us about the well? I thought to myself. But I was shocked and confused about what was going on. I took my phone out of my pocket to try and record a video. A second before I could start recording, the scream stopped, and the well went silent. But then, after a few seconds, I heard laughter, the laughter of younger women, loud laughter, sweet laughter, but nothing about it was sweet. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and turned around, quietly running back to the hut. Terrified as hell, I quietly slipped through the window into my sister's room and mine. As I tried to process what had happened, I tried not to wake anyone up. Dad would kill me if he found out what I did. He's one of those old-fashioned fathers. Mom would be disappointed in me. This is the perfect vacation for her, and she must already be dealing with the stress from me and Lily. I lay down in bed and covered myself. After a few heavy breaths to calm down, I fell asleep again, somehow. The next morning, I got up as my mom nervously pulled the blanket off me. "Clay, what did you do? Why did you do that to them?" she said angrily. I tried to understand what she was referring to. What are you talking about?" Then I realized she knew I had left the hut last night, but then she said something else. "Why did you take the flowers out of the vase? All the vases in the house are suddenly empty." "What the hell?" I said. "Mom, I didn't do that." "Clay, the fact that you don't respect the place and its beliefs doesn't mean you have to act that way and steal them." "Mom, I didn't steal any of the flowers," I said. "Clay, don't lie to me. I'm so angry and disappointed in you," she said, bursting out of the room. I was exhausted from the terrible night I had, stood up, and saw Lily sitting and looking at me. "Clay, what did you do?" "Lily, you have to believe me," I told her, closing the door and locking it. I leaned over to her and whispered, "Lily, listen. I don't know what's going on with this place, but last night I was near the town's well and I heard screams." "What?" She was surprised. "You snuck out of the hut in the middle of the night? You know that's forbidden. That's not the point. Listen, Lily, something bad is happening here. I don't know what's going on, but I think we should get out of here." You have to understand that Lily, despite her moody and cheeky nature towards everyone, can empathize with others' suffering. She painfully went through middle school. "Clay," she said to me, "please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was," I told her. "Listen, we can't stay here the whole weekend. We need to get out somehow." "Good luck convincing Mom," she said to me. In the afternoon, I went to my mom. "Mom, listen, we can't stay here." My mom looked at me frustrated. "What's wrong, Clay? Don't tell me you've become just like your sister." I didn't want to tell her the true reason. I knew she wouldn't believe me and would think it was an excuse to leave. "Mom, please, you have to believe me. I don't like this place." "Clay, calm down," she said. "This place is great. We're isolated from the modern world, eating excellent food, and resting all day. I truly believe we're having a soul purification experience that we all need, especially you, after you stole the flowers." I didn't steal them, but 3 soft knocking sounds at the door interrupted our conversation. I went to the door, and there stood the same 3 girls outside the door. I opened it, and I noticed that, at this time, they had flowers tied to their ears, the same kind of flower that had disappeared from our vases, marigolds. "Good evening," they said with a gentle smile. "We just wanted to make sure you lovely guests come to dinner at 6 p.m. tonight." I stared at their flowers. "Why are these flowers on your ears?" I nervously asked my mom. "It's okay," the middle one said. "We're wearing the flowers because today is a special day." "What's so special about today?" I asked. She grinned and said to me, "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." My mom grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. She thanked the eerie women and closed the door. "Stop being rude, Clay," she said, walking away. At 6 p.m., we returned to the well center. I couldn't help but think about what I had heard there last night. Everyone was back, smiling and giggling as if everything in the town was normal. We approached and sat down again at a table set for dinner. This time, the Mackenzie family who had been here yesterday wasn't there, nor were the spouses the father had noticed who had arrived the day before. "Mom," I said, "where is the family that was here yesterday?" "I don't know. Maybe they wanted to stay in their hut and rest. It's weird," I told her. Instead, a new family appeared in the crowd. Next to us sat 5 people, 2 men, 2 daughters, and a son. I approached the son, who seemed about my age, and asked him, "Hey, is this your first day here?" "Yes. Our dads wanted us to vacation here. How long have you been here?" he asked. I told him we had arrived yesterday, and he raised an eyebrow, asking, "How did you get here?" When we parked, there were no other cars besides ours. What the hell? What the hell is happening at this place? I tried to tell my mom about our car, but suddenly, the gong bell rang again, and the old man stood at the bar, delivering the same speech. This time, he thanked the Smith family, the family sitting next to us, for choosing to participate in the soul purification efforts and blah blah blah. It was the same thing he had told us yesterday, only this time directed at the new family who had joined this crazy town. The food was served, meat and rice again. While everyone ate and enjoyed it, Lily and I didn't. We had no appetite for this food, this town, these people, and those damn screams. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what was happening in that well. I decided to stand up in the middle of dinner, and suddenly, everyone dressed in white stopped eating and talking and stared at me, staring without blinking, as if their smiles were replaced by confused and sad faces. They stared at me, and the old man approached and asked, "Why are you standing?" "I'm not hungry," I told him. "Eat, it will cleanse your soul." My mom reached out her hands to me, but I pushed her away. "No, thank you. I'm not interested." I stood up and walked away angrily, everyone at the table staring at me as I left. My parents were embarrassed, and Lily was ashamed. That evening, the parents and Lily returned to the hut, and I was in my room. "What the hell was that, Clay?" my mom asked me angrily. "Mom, enough. I can't take it anymore." I began to cry. "What happened to you, Clay?" she asked, her anger pausing for a moment as she saw her big boy break down in tears. "Mom, I went out of the hut last night because I heard screams from the well. When I was there, I heard people screaming. Screams, Mom, then laughter, women laughing. I don't know what it was. I don't know who stole the flowers, but it wasn't me, okay? Didn't you notice that the family from yesterday isn't here? Didn't you suspect that something damn strange is happening here? and please. I know you wanted me to be here for you, but this is not a good place. It's not a place to cleanse the mind and soul. I just want to go home," I cried, pressing my head into a pillow that lay near my knees. She took a deep breath, not nervously, but emotionally. "Clay, I don't know what's wrong with you. What you're telling me? The truth, Mom. I'm telling you the truth." She placed her warm hand on my head and slowly lifted me up. "I brought you here because I wanted us all to have a good time, to relax, to have a calm mind, and to be peaceful and pure. But you're my son, and the last thing I wanted was to see you suffer like this. And if you're feeling this bad here, we'll leave." "Gobu, what? Really?" "Yes. You're my son, Clay, and there's no better way for a spiritual and pure mind than to help my child," she said. "I'm telling Dad we're leaving tomorrow after breakfast. You and Lily start packing your things." "Thank you. Thank you, Mom. Really, thank you." I thanked her as my tears stopped. She left the room, and I began to pack my luggage. Lily entered the room, and after I told her the miracle that had just happened, she also began to pack. In the middle of the night, I woke up again, and my whole family was asleep. This time, I didn't wake up from a bad dream, but from a strange sound. I opened my eyes and got out of bed. Suddenly, I panicked as I looked out the window. I saw one of the young women standing outside my window, grinning with the same flower in her hair. I took a step back and ran to my parents' room to wake my dad. But as soon as I crossed the living room, I noticed another young woman right outside the window near the front door, the same as the first one, grinning with the same silly flower in her hair. I ran further and stormed into my parents' room, only to see a third woman doing the same thing right above my parents' bed. I screamed in fear, and my parents woke up in panic. They looked behind them to see the source of my terror, and noticed the eerie woman. "Mom, Dad, we have to get out of here, now!" I shouted. Lily woke up to my scream and ran to me as she noticed the girl. The four of us ran to the living room, but as we tried to open the door and get out, we heard a soft knocking at the window. There they were, the three eerie women who had come earlier today. They stood with gentle grins, behaving as if everything was normal. They grabbed our hands and tied them, forcefully pulling us outside. There were too many, at least 30 of them. They smiled and led us to the town center to the well. When we arrived, I noticed that all the townsfolk were awake, all dressed in white, surrounding the well, holding hands. The women brought us to the center of the circle around the well. The townsfolk sang a song in a strange language and prayed. Suddenly, everything went silent, and we were surrounded, trapped, all holding hands in a large circle that enveloped us and the well. They smiled. The town elder approached us, holding a flower in his hand, and this time he was smiling too. "It's time," he said. "Dear Johnsons, it's time to finally cleanse your souls." "What does it mean to cleanse? What the hell is happening here?" I screamed. "As you said, you're here because you believe in our method." "What the hell method?" my mom asked helplessly. The old townsperson approached my mom and placed his hand on her belly. "I understand you enjoyed your meal tonight," he said. "Well, the Mackenzies were certainly a delicious meal." Oh, no. Then it dawned on us. The meat, that delicious meat we had eaten, was human flesh. The flesh of previous tourists who had come here. I couldn't believe it was happening, that I tasted. "Oh my God, I want to puke my entire stomach," the old man continued. "And tomorrow, all our townsfolk and the new guests, the Smiths, will get a taste of the God's meal, which is purified from your flesh, in just a few moments." Lily broke into tears and agony. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mom was helpless and about to faint. But my dad was angry, too angry to give up. He looked at me and nodded, a signal that it was now or never. In a split second, we both stood up and stepped around the girls surrounding us. I bit through the ribbon they had tied around my dad's hands. He did the same, and we were both free. The other women tried to reach us and attack, but my dad pushed them away. I freed my mom and Lily and helped him. Suddenly, even Lily stood up and helped us, and my mom, despite all her peaceful and spiritual agendas, helped us as well. We all fought for our survival. The townsfolk gathered around us in a circle to form a human wall. I immediately went to the old man and shoved him to the ground. I grabbed him by the throat, strangled him, and locked my elbows so he couldn't let go or strike back. Instantly, everyone in the circle was alarmed. A few women tried to rescue him from me, but I yelled, "One more step and I'll break this old man's neck." The old man could barely breathe. "Move! Step back!" my dad shouted with a stone in his hand, one he had found near the well. The townsfolk slowly stepped back but were still alarmed and let us go out of fear of their old man. My dad ordered the old man to show us where they keep the car, and the old man, his face turning blue, pointed the way. My dad, Lily, my mom, and I began to run as the old man became our hostage. The people behind us tried to chase us. "Stay there," I shouted. The old man gestured with his hands for them to stay. After a few minutes, we reached a rusty warehouse, and the old man pointed to the door as we entered. Upon entering, we were shocked by the sight. Dozens of cars, family SUVs, probably from previous tourists who had been eaten here. "What the hell?" I said to myself. "How many of them did you slaughter and eat?" I yelled at the old man, pulling my hands even tighter around his neck. We found our car. My dad opened the trunk and told me to put the old man inside. I threw him in and closed the trunk. We quickly got into the car, and my dad started the engine. He pressed the gas pedal, and the car sped through the warehouse walls. In the rearview mirror, we saw a bunch of women in white, at least 50 of them, chasing the car and yelling, "No! No! Bring our dad back, please!" But they weren't fast enough. My dad drove full speed to the main entrance and broke through it. We left the town and drove into the forest. We sped through the forest, and after about 10 minutes our car began to slow down. No more fuel. They must have drained the tank mostly. The car gradually lost speed and finally came to a complete stop. Luckily, or not, it was enough for us to reach a lonely motel. It seemed empty enough for us to slip the old man inside without anyone noticing. While my dad and mom discussed with the receptionist about getting an affordable room, Lily and I held the old man with our hands, pretending he was our old grandfather who couldn't walk alone. We went to the ground floor room, overlooking the dark forest. My dad knocked the old man unconscious and placed him in the bathroom, locking the door. While they thought about how to explain the whole situation to the police, I sat down to write down this crazy story. It's 2 a.m., and I was distracted by that same sound I heard on the first night. The same eerie sound, that creepy laughter again. I stuck my head out of the screen, and I can see them, the women in white, standing outside our window, leaning their heads against the glass and beginning to whisper, "Please, open. We're hungry. Yes, we're hungry. Please open, let us in." I have to end the story here because the window is slowly starting to crack, as well as the front door. Although my grandmother never directly referred to herself as a witch, I don't believe there's a better word to describe what she truly was. She liked to tell people she was simply spiritual, and that she conducted tarot readings for the townspeople in her hometown of Ravenwood for fun. I remember occasionally overhearing my grandmother giving advice to the other women in the village, advice that often involved some sort of spell or magic. She regularly corrected those who called her a witch, insisting they simply call her by her name, Marilyn Grace. Raised by my mother and grandmother, I spent most of my life in my grandmother's house in Ravenwood, where I frequently watched her perform rituals, whether for luck or to ward off evil spirits like the shadow spirits. She used to say that you can never be too careful, and it's better to be safe than sorry. My mother was sometimes involved in these rituals and held some of her own spiritual beliefs, though not as deeply rooted as my grandmother's. Both my mother and grandmother always carried crystals with them. My mother wore hers on a ring, while my grandmother preferred a necklace she concealed beneath her blouses. I remember following my grandmother around the house every few weeks, as she sprayed every room with the contents of a black bottle she kept in a pretty wooden box on the living room bookshelf. I also recall sitting near her on Sunday mornings while she burned sage on the porch and recited the Lord's Prayer. Despite being raised by two adults deeply involved in witchcraft and spiritual practices, I was never truly someone who believed in things like evil spirits or placing a bowl of rice for good luck. Of course, I never argued with them when they performed these rituals. I simply sat back and let them sprinkle black salt on our door and window frames to prevent evil spirits from entering our home, helped paint the tree stumps white to ward off the shadow spirits, and drank the moon water my grandmother made each month. While I'm not the most spiritual person, at least not compared to my mother and grandmother, I often find myself doing things like hanging my broom upside down, placing a horseshoe above my front door, and wearing the talismanic sword of Archangel Michael that my grandmother gave me when I was about 8 years old, convinced someone was casting spells on me. It reminds me of her and makes me feel closer to her, even though she's no longer here. Plus, I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me feel safe. One thing that always intrigued me, however, was the story about the witch in the mirror. In my grandmother's house, there was a small closet at the end of the hallway that was never used for storage. The closet door was painted black, the only door in the entire house with that color. I was told never to go into that closet, which naturally made me even more curious about what was kept inside. When I was about 10 years old, I was playing hide-and-seek with some of my cousins when my younger cousin Rebecca and I decided to hide in the closet. Surprisingly, the door wasn't locked, and we opened it to find a single oval mirror hanging on the back wall. The closet itself wasn't very large, and barely had enough space for the two of us side by side without much room to move. When our grandmother found us, she pulled us out of the closet, slammed the door shut behind us, and dragged us into the kitchen, where she scolded us. After that was done, she gathered the rest of the cousins and sat us all down to tell us about the mirror she kept in the closet and why we should never go back inside. According to my grandmother, my mother, when she was 1 year old, had been targeted by a witch named Claudia, who was possessed by an evil spirit. While she didn't go into detail, my grandmother said that Claudia had repeatedly tried to kidnap and sacrifice my mother and regularly cast spells against our family. My grandmother recounted that when my mother was about 5 years old, she finally managed to trap Claudia with the help of some friends. And now, Claudia's soul was trapped in the mirror, where she had remained for years. As a precaution, my grandmother told us never to look into the mirror or attempt to contact Claudia's spirit. She feared that we might accidentally release her, unleashing great evil upon the village. My mother confirmed the story, and for weeks I begged my grandmother to tell me the spell she used to trap Claudia. But each time I brought it up, she became increasingly frustrated and angry. Eventually, I realized she would never tell me, and that there was probably a good reason for it, so I let it go. Over time, I forgot all about the mirror and Claudia's spirit, until a few weeks ago. When I was 15, my mother and I moved to Cedar Falls, and we visited my grandmother about every other month. The last time my mother visited my grandmother alone, I couldn't get time off work to accompany her. 2 days after my mother arrived at my grandmother's, I received a call from a neighbor informing me that both my mother and grandmother were dead. I rushed down to speak with the police, who told me that both had suffered heart attacks in their sleep on the same night. How could that happen? I didn't even have much time to mourn my loss, as I was immediately told to take over all of my grandmother's belongings and donate the things I didn't want to keep. I spent 2 days going through every room in the house, packing up all her herbs and random trinkets she kept in odd places. Some of my cousins stopped by, and I let them take a few things to remember our grandmother by. I decided to keep most of the stuff and loaded my car with as much as I could. As I took one last look through the house, I stood at the end of the hallway and stared at the black door. I considered leaving the mirror there, but I didn't believe my grandmother would leave something so important behind. So I grabbed a random bedsheet, opened the closet door, and covered the mirror before placing it in my car on the back seat. The mirror gave me an uneasy feeling, but I told myself it was just because of the stories my grandmother had told me. In the end, I decided to place the mirror upside down and kept it covered by securing the bedsheet over it with a hair tie. When I got home, I realized I now had a new problem. What should I do with the mirror? I knew nothing about maintaining a cursed mirror meant to imprison an evil soul, so after much deliberation, I decided to store it in the back closet of my house. I left the bedsheet on it and propped it against the wall. At first, everything was fine, but about 3 days after bringing the mirror home, I noticed the closet doors were opening and closing by themselves every few minutes. I woke up, walked down the hallway, and saw the doors wide open. I closed them and went about my morning, only to find them wide open again after breakfast. I rummaged through my grandmother's box until I found what I was looking for: the jar of black salt. I took it to the closet and laid a line of salt under the closet doors. The doors stayed closed for a few days until about a week later, when I came home from shopping to find the salt scattered all over the hallway and the closet door wide open again. I tried to remember all the other rituals my grandmother had performed to get rid of evil spirits and carried out some of them, but nothing worked. At this point, paranoia and fear began to set in. One morning, I woke up to find the bedsheet that had been covering the mirror thrown into the hallway, and the mirror now facing the hallway. I realized I didn't want it anywhere else in my house. After some online research, I tried cleaning the mirror a few times before bringing it back into the house and placing it back in the closet. I left it there for 2 weeks, and when nothing happened, I finally took it out and decided to set it up in the guest room. I found myself checking it regularly during the day, hoping something crazy would happen, but nothing did, and I thought I might have gotten rid of all the evil spirits in the mirror. I guess you know where this leads, and that I was wrong. I realized this when one night, I was awakened by the sound of a woman crying. I got up and peered out my bedroom window into the backyard below, but it was empty. Then I went into the hallway and my study, looked out that window and at the front yard and the street below, but there was no one. Confused, I went back into the hallway and followed the crying to locate the source of the sound. It eventually led me downstairs to the guest room. As I tried to open the door, I felt a sudden drop in temperature and wished I had brought my blanket. Slowly, I pushed open the guest room door and looked inside, but there was nothing there. I started to get annoyed and reached for the light switch, turned on the light, and searched the room. Then I finally realized where the sound was coming from. Standing in the doorway, I looked into the mirror hanging directly across the wall. A woman was blocking my reflection in the mirror. She was kneeling, head bowed, shoulders shaking as she continued to cry and sniffle. I could see she was wearing a black lace dress, but I couldn't discern any further details as her long brown hair hung over her face and most of her body. Slowly, I approached the mirror and stopped about a meter in front of it. "Hello?" I asked. The woman looked at me, and I gasped. I just stared at my own face, but not quite my face as reflected by the woman in the mirror. When she saw me, she stopped crying and stood up. Her face was red and blotchy, and she sniffled as she pushed her hand under her nose. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Are you Claudia?" I asked. She nodded, pushed her hair back from her face and let it fall over her shoulders. She blinked and tilted her head to study me. "You're Marilyn's granddaughter," she whispered reverently. I nodded. "So was it you?" "Was what I?" she asked. "Did you banish the evil spirit that has been possessing me all these years?" I asked, leaning forward with my hands on the glass. I didn't know how to respond, as I wasn't really sure what I was doing, and it obviously hadn't worked the way I wanted. It was strange, talking to someone trapped in the mirror. The reflection of the room could be seen around Claudia, but it was almost as if we were looking through a window or something. "So?" she asked, waiting for an answer. I nodded. "Yes, I guess that was me." "Oh, thank you," she sighed. "How long has it been?" 40 years, I replied. "And your grandmother?" "Dead." "I'm so sorry. And your mother?" "Dead?" She nodded slowly. "I know we don't know each other, but do you think you could let me out of here?" "What?" "Number. You tried to kill my mother multiple times. How am I supposed to know you're not trying to kill me?" "That wasn't me. It was the spirit that possessed me to do those things, but you've gotten rid of it," she said, as if she were about to start crying again. "Sorry, but how am I supposed to know that?" Claudia took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right. You have no reason to trust me. Besides, you don't seem like someone who knows magic, so I don't think you could free me even if you wanted to." She sounded sincere, but I didn't trust her. She hadn't seemed very trustworthy from the start, and she was right. I couldn't free her even if I wanted to. "Why do I look like you?" I asked. She shrugged. I stared at her a while longer, but began to feel uneasy about our resemblance. I left Claudia in the mirror for about 4 days before things got worse. I noticed random objects in my house going missing before they eventually reappeared in the strangest places. Lights would randomly turn on and off at night, and I heard footsteps and children's laughter in random rooms. Even Claudia began to seem frightened. "You're scared," she said one day when I walked into the guest room to close a window that had opened by itself. I didn't respond. "It's not me if you think that. The spell your grandmother cast on me prevents me from using magic." I looked at her and sighed. "All right, so what is it then?" She stayed silent for a minute while I watched her. "Did you bring more of your grandmother's stuff into this house?" she asked. "Yes, a lot of stuff like herbs and bottles with things, a few clothes, books, that kind of stuff." "Stuff she used for spells?" Claudia asked. "I mean, yeah, probably." "Then it's likely something you brought with you. Probably a spirit sneaked in with the things." I thought about it for a moment. What she said made sense, but I still didn't want to trust her blindly. "Okay, how do I get rid of it?" I asked. "You'll need some candles and you have to wait until night," she replied, looking around the room. I did as she suggested, and after the sun set, I gathered some candles and went into the guest room. I placed the candles a few meters away from the mirror in the room so that Claudia could guide me through the process. "Okay, you need to light these," she said as I set the last candle. I grabbed a lighter and then took out the jar of black salt. "What is this for?" Claudia asked. I opened the jar and took the mirror off the wall, instead leaning it against the side and surrounding the area around the mirror with a circle of salt. "That's in case you're lying and trying to escape somehow," I replied, putting the jar down once I was done. "I highly doubt you can free me. You don't even know how to banish a spirit," she scoffed. I ignored her as I lit all the candles. "You need to turn off the lights," she said. I walked over and did as she said, then returned to the mirror, standing between the burning candles. "Okay," Claudia whispered. "Once the candles have melted a bit, you'll drip some wax onto the mirror." "Why the mirror?" "Because it's already magical. You can use the magical energy to banish the spirit." I did as she said. "What now?" "Sit on the floor, look away from the mirror, and close your eyes. You might feel something touching you or breathing near you, but don't open your eyes." I sat with my back to her and did as she instructed, wiping my sweaty hands on my pants every few minutes. I tried to focus on my breathing and not become paranoid. After a few seconds, a strong, cold gust of wind swept through the room, followed by the sound of breaking glass. I forgot what Claudia had told me and opened my eyes to find the mirror completely shattered and the bedroom window wide open. All the candles had also been extinguished. "Claudia?" I asked. There was no answer, and I stood up and turned the light back on. I walked back to the mirror shards and picked them up. It was broken into 6 large pieces, and I noticed that the salt was now scattered all over the floor. I placed the mirror frame on the ground and put the shards back in their places. But when I looked into the mirror, I could only see my own reflection. Claudia was long gone. "Damn!" I shouted in frustration. "Emily!" I heard a voice call from outside. I went to the window and looked down to see Claudia standing in my front yard. She waved, and I noticed her face changing. I stared closely as it transformed from my face to one with dark gray, leathery skin that was heavily wrinkled. She had black eyes, deep set in their sockets and about the size of golf balls. Her nose was small and looked as though it was split in the middle. Her lips were the same color as her skin but were dry and covered in cuts. I watched her look up and followed her gaze to see a flock of crows descending around her, circling her for a few seconds before both the crows and she disappeared. Seconds later, all the windows in every house on the street exploded, filling the front yards with shards of glass. The streetlights followed, flickering a few times before they too exploded and went out. The street was plunged into darkness, and I noticed that even the moon and stars had vanished. I spent the rest of the night flipping through my grandmother's books and journals, searching for something that could help me, but nothing I read matched this situation. 3 days have now passed since that night, and the light hasn't returned. Some of my neighbors have tried to drive away in their cars, and the rest of us watched as they drove into the surrounding darkness, but they seemed to always disappear. The only evidence they ever left was the screams heard shortly after their departure into the darkness. I don't know if this will reach anyone, but I've run out of options. It seems like the days are getting darker, something I never thought possible. I can barely see the houses next door anymore. I just hope no one finds out that all of this is my fault. I hate to think about what would happen if they did.